Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian. I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction House taking a look at some of the guns that they're going to be selling in their upcoming December of 2016 premiere auction. I have three out here today because they're all three of the same basic type and they're really cool. These are Collier repeating flintlocks. Now, Collier is probably the best known name among repeating, revolving flintlock firearms, but he wasn't the only one. There were other people who developed guns like this, often independently. There were never very many of these types of firearms made because they were quite expensive to manufacture and could only be made by pretty talented, skilled gunsmiths. But you do see them around. Collier has become the best known of the type. And Collier was also one of the later examples. So Elisha Collier actually lived in the United States. He was an American, and he developed this idea with a guy named Artemis Wheeler. In fact, it may have been Wheeler who really came up with this particular system. And Wheeler patented it in the United States, and then in 1818, Elisha Collier went to England and pretty much immediately upon arrival patented the system in England with an acknowledgement to Wheeler for the idea. Exactly what was going on between the two isn't documented. We can only kind of speculate. It seems to me, again, just speculation, that the two probably came to an agreement that Wheeler would market and manufacture and sell these in the United States, and Collier could do it in the UK. What ended up happening was Wheeler was never able to really get this system off the ground in the United States. He didn't manufacture any substantial number, where Collier manufactured 350 or maybe 400 of these guns and obviously became the best known name in repeating flintlocks. So there were three different models that were made of these, and it's really cool. We actually have two of them here. So this one in front is a first pattern gun, and then the long rifle here and the pistol are both second pattern guns. So when we take a look up close, I'll show you the differences between those. In total, the highest serial number known of the first pattern is only 23. Highest serial number known of the second pattern guns is 161, so a few more of those. The third pattern gun, which isn't represented here, was actually a percussion version. These were developed right at the end of the flintlock era of firearms, right before percussion caps were invented and became mainstream. So some of the flintlock ones have actually been converted to percussion systems. That was done back in the 1800s, obviously. But it's interesting that a lot of the Colliers that exist today, the flintlock ones, are actually in remarkably good shape, and that's probably because they were bought when flintlocks were really going out of style, and so they were probably bought largely by people who were interested in firearms for their mechanics and for display, and because they were cool, expensive toys, and probably not used very much. Comparatively, the percussion Colliers appear to, in general, be a lot more heavily used because they would have been much more attractive to people who are looking for a practical modern gun. Now, the Collier has a particular place in history, not just because it was relatively largely produced for this type of system, but also because Samuel Colt specifically acknowledges the Collier as being a main source of inspiration for him. He actually encountered a couple of Colliers in India while traveling, and I should point out at this point that 50 to 100 of these were actually purchased by the British military and sent to India where they were used. Well, Colt saw one there, and that was the inspiration. That was, wow, you know, this is pretty cool, but I think I can do it better. And specifically, what Colt was able to do better was add mechanical rotation to the cylinder. So on the Colliers, when you cock the hammer, it doesn't actually turn the cylinder. You have to cock the hammer, you have to lower the frizzen, and you have to manually rotate the cylinder in between each shot. So there's some work that you have to do. However, you do still get a 5-shot repeating firearm, which is pretty awesome and pretty ahead of its time for a flintlock, especially with only having one lock mechanism. A lot of the earlier repeating flintlocks had a separate lock or a separate frizzen on each chamber. So that's a lot of expensive parts to make. It's kind of fragile. It makes it a lot more awkward to carry because you've got frizzens and pans sticking out all over the place. The Collier really was a well-made and pretty cool gun. Now, I should also point out Collier himself did not actually make these. He had the patent, he did the design, but he appears to have subcontracted the guns out to other mainstream British firearms manufacturers. One in particular that's called out is Henry Nock. I believe Rigby also did at least some of the manufacture of these. They're generally not marked with a manufacturer, they're just marked with Collier's patent and a serial number. So it's very difficult to trace that back. But there are some contemporary gunsmiths who reported in various correspondence that they were doing work for Elisha Collier. So that's how we know about that. With that in mind, let's go ahead and take a closer look at these. We'll start with the first pattern and then do the second. So this is a first pattern or first model of Collier. That, by the way, is nomenclature from the modern collecting fraternity. That is not something that Collier actually designated himself. Now, what stands out, the definitive features of the first pattern guns are they have this pawl and spool here on the priming box, and this does automatically prime itself. We'll show you that in a moment. And then the cock here is actually located inside the lock plate. So that's what distinguishes a first pattern gun. You'll also typically find them with smooth-sided cylinders. In this case, gunmetal or brass. Now the markings on here are a little light, but let's take a closer look. So the marking on there is E.H. Collier patent and number 9. That is gun number 9, not patent number 9. As I mentioned earlier, the highest known serial number of this first pattern is 23. Now, the way the priming works is you actually have a box here that's full of priming powder, and when you put the frizzen down in position to fire, you can see that this pawl is going to hit that little three-sided wheel. That acts just like a powder throw if you're into modern reloading. Basically, you have 3 little chambers in there that fill up with powder in this box. I can open the lid there, so you'd fill that up. And then this is just going to dispense 1 priming pan's worth of powder each time it's rotated a third of a revolution. So when I put this in position, that rotates into place, and it's going to dump that powder into the pan here, which is now covered and protected. Then when you fire, the flint is going to come down, it's going to strike this pan, open this up, drop spark into the pan there, and fire, like so. Now, to fire a second shot, you have to manually cock the hammer, and you'll notice that the chambers here are rebaited. There's a shoulder in the barrel, so what you have to do is pull the cylinder back and then rotate it, and it will snap into position just like that. That does 2 things. It ensures that the cylinder is properly indexed and your chamber lines up exactly with the barrel, and it's also going to act as mostly as a gas shield. So this is, you could think of this like a Nagant revolver. They don't quite work the same way, but that prevents you from getting a lot of fire and projectile particles spit out the gap between the barrel and the cylinder. In order to load this, you would use a loading rod and just manually load each chamber there. Now with the cylinder rotated and a live round in place, you would simply go back, replace this. That's going to reprime the pan. Hammer's already cocked, and you can fire and repeat the process 5 times. This particular gun is actually a smoothbore. It's a 69 caliber smoothbore musket. Not a shotgun. It would have been presumably a single projectile, just like a smoothbore muzzle loading, well, musket. Interestingly, it also has a spike bayonet on it, held in place by this little spring catch. This comes out, latches into place. Not exactly the world's most impressive bayonet, but it is something. Presumably this would be like a naval pattern gun, where you could use it kind of like a blunderbuss at close range if you needed to. Little cruciform bayonet there. And when you're not using that bayonet, you push this spring detent to unlock it, bring it back here, and it's going to latch. The tip is held just under that little latch. True of a musket, there are really no sights on this. You just have a groove in the top of the action to sight down. All right, now we have our first pattern up here and our second pattern on the bottom. The distinctive changes are the cock is now on the outside of the lock plate, and they've changed the mechanism for the automatic primer. So instead of having this pawl and wheel, we now have it connected permanently via this rod which is going to rotate this cylinder. So instead of having 3 separate chambers that each hold priming powder, this has just one. And it fills up as you drop it down, or rather it fills up as you lift it up, and as you drop it down, it opens, drops that powder into the pan, and then covers it and acts as the frizzen until you fire and the hammer throws it out of the way and fires the charge. So you can also clearly see the difference in cylinders. They've gone to a steel cylinder. Exactly what type of steel, I'm not sure. That might be something like twisted iron or Damascus. At any rate, it is no longer gunmetal, and it is also now fluted to reduce weight a bit. Still 5-shot, and this one is actually a rifle instead of a smoothbore. The markings on this guy are a little bit more worn, and they're kind of hidden in the engraving there, but this still says E.H. Collier, and down here, 123 patent. So there was a separate, we presume there were separate serial number ranges for the first and second models of the gun. So this is the 123rd of these second model ones produced. Now we still have a manual rotation system, so the hammer is cocked, which means I can pull the cylinder back and rotate it. You can rotate these either direction, clockwise or counterclockwise. There's no restriction on that, and it is something you have to remember to do, otherwise you'll just fire a priming pan into an empty chamber. This is what allowed Colt to make his improvements and give us what is effectively the single action revolver. We do also have some markings up on the barrel rib. We can see it says E.H. Collier, London. There's the London. Because these were, of course, all manufactured in the UK. Last, but very certainly not least, we also have this Revolver, second pattern handgun version of the Collier. Same sort of markings on it. These are a lot easier to read, E.H. Collier, and this one is 89 patent. This, again, maintains the manual rotation of the cylinder. We have a rod-connected priming system here, so there's the automatic priming. And again, on this one, you've got a little round door that you can open to fill the priming box. And that's pretty much all there is to it. This is mechanically identical to the long rifle version of the same. These do all have ramrods in them, or cleaning rods, because you do need to clean the barrel. These are obviously black powder guns, so they will get dirty. And then you could probably use that as your actual ramming lever here. Which reminds me, actually, there's one other neat feature to this particular pistol, which is that it has a cover plate on the front of the cylinder. So that comes off to allow you to load, but then it sits on top. It doesn't interfere with rotating the cylinder. It just protects the powder charges and the projectiles, so you don't get gunk in there. Nothing is going to interfere with the cylinder rotating smoothly when you need to use it. You know, these were expensive guns. These took a lot of excellent craftsmanship to manufacture. This would have been manufactured in the 1820s, probably the early 1820s. So quite a lot of firepower for the end of the flintlock era. Not many people were walking around with 5 shots ready at hand. Thank you for watching, guys. Colliers are really, really rare today. It's the Rare Museum even that has one of these. So it's really cool not just to look at one, but to be able to see a pistol, a rifle, and the very early version all at the same time and compare them. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the video. I hope you learned something. If you are in the position to be owning one of these yourself, add them to your own personal collection. Well, all 3 of them are, of course, coming up for sale here. If you take a look at the description text below, you'll find links to all 3 catalog pages at Rock Island, where you can see their provenances, pictures, descriptions, all of their information, and place bids over the phone or over the web, or come and participate live in the auction. Thanks for watching.